Now, for years, there's actually been a debate on how best to get the message out on what's happening to our climate. Now, one of the questions has been what to call it, global warming or climate change. Now, two different monikers for the same problem, but two different reactions when polled. And I find this fascinating. So polling by the Yale Project on Climate Change Communication found that the term global warming is actually more effective at associating greater public understanding, emotional engagement, and support for action than the term climate change. In fact, the study shows that the term climate change appears to actually reduce issue engagement by not only Democrats, independents, and liberals, as well as moderates and a variety of subgroups within American society. That includes men, women, minorities, different generation, and across political and partisan lines. The study also shows that people tend to associate global warming with extreme weather. Quote, within the weather category, global warming generates a higher percentage of associations to extreme weather than does climate change, which introduces more associations to general weather patterns. Now, what do you guys think? I mean, I found this incredibly interesting that just a term that you use changes the entire how people feel about it.
Yeah, I mean, I'm really torn on this because for me personally, I think climate change is more it's more accurate and it's less. I don't know. It just seems to me that it's more scientific. Whereas global warming it simplifies the issue too much for me. But the problem is because global warming, as the polls have shown it, because it does simplify the issue. You know, more people they have greater understanding of it, so they have a more emotive reaction to it. I mean, my PhD looks at the use of emotive language in reporting, and this is a really good example of showing that the way you phrase certain things when you tell people about them can have a huge impact on what they believe to be true or not. And so for me, I feel that whilst I don't want the media to start having to just always refer to it as global warming because that is dumbing it down, I think for the greater good they should do, because it will have a greater impact on the general populace, and therefore some people might actually get something done about it.
No, but Stephen, the globe we are actually going through global warming. I mean, the planet is warming if you check out any of the charts. So I think obviously both terms are accurate, and I don't think the term global warming is really dumbing it down all that much.
Yeah, I mean, I don't want to say that global warming isn't accurate. It certainly is accurate, but I just feel it is a very for me it just simplified it, because climate change that involves a whole ton of there is cooling in certain areas, there's rising of sea levels, there's a whole ton of things that I associate with climate change, whereas global warming, I just think things are getting hotter, and for me, I just think it's dumbing down. But I suppose I don't want to diss many Americans, but I will do here. I think maybe they do need it dumbed down for them.
I actually think this is a good example of where progressives have sort of struggled with labeling and marketing this cause and the righteousness of the cause. I'll preface this by saying, up until about a year ago, I wasn't a climate change denier, but I was still skeptical about how involved humanity was in causing that change. I thought maybe there was an overlap of a natural global change and we're contributing to that, but I didn't. But in the past year, I've become quite convinced that we are one of the driving factors of this, hands down. And part of the reason I was put off by that was the notion of global warming at first. But to Stephen's point about phrasing, it's huge. And I mean, I mentioned this, I think, in a comment a couple of videos ago about Obamacare, and I said, you know, I really hate even when we call it the Affordable Care Act, because that's not the full name. The full name is the Patient Protection and Affordable Care Act, which I think when you phrase it and you say it like it is, it sounds much better and much more appealing. So I think in that one example, progressives did a great disservice to themselves by playing ball and calling it Obamacare, or shortening it to Affordable Care Act. And in this case, I think they've also dropped the ball by starting off with global warming, which has polarized a few people, and then moving to climate change, which has given, I think, the perception of some people, and maybe why conservatives are hammering so hard, that they can force the left to compromise on this issue and come to the middle, which by their standards means come to our side and no ifs, ands, or buts about it.
Right. I love how you bring up the point about the Affordable Care Act, the Patient Protection and Affordable Care Act, because when polled, people actually really like that, and especially when they're told about the provisions in it. But when you call it Obamacare, people are like, oh my God, what is this, Obamacare? Fucking hate it. But you don't even know what it is, and they think it's a completely separate entity than the Patient Protection and Affordable Care Act. So I think absolutely you're 100% right on that point. And I think you're also right, and you make such a good point when you say that, you know, it's sort of bringing the conversation onto the Republicans' terms, onto the right wing's term, because they are so incredibly good at doing that, at changing the conversation. I mean, I'm going to mention here Frank Luntz in a few minutes, and how he helped shape the climate change, I guess the term climate change, into its current iteration. So that's what Republicans are good at. They're so good at messaging because they actually don't spend any time creating new policy, so they got to spend their time doing something, and what they do is they come up with buzzwords.
Yeah, whilst I don't want to go down a Obamacare route, just to say that I think in the long run, using Obamacare will work, because the Democrats will then be able to own that and the Republicans will struggle with it. That's just a side point. In terms of the kind of how the Republicans have been able to shape the discourse of this argument, is that because people are saying, is it climate change? You know, is it climate changing? Or is it warming? You know, some people are saying it's not happening. There's confusion over, you know, the terms and stuff. And because the kind of the progressives and the meteorologists, they haven't just said, right, we are, and the media especially haven't said, right, we're going to call it global warming, or we're going to call it climate change, because they've been varying their terms of use in describing the phenomenon. People just haven't been able to grip onto it as much, and then, you know, act upon it. So I think that's been one of the issues. And, you know, as just about to say now, is Frank Luntz. You know, the Republicans know what term is least likely to evoke emotion, so that's one that they're going to use.
Exactly, and something that's sort of interesting that you bring up, Stephen, is that scientists have actually been using both terms for decades. Climate change, of course, being first used in 1956 in a paper by Gilbert Plass, and global warming first used by climatologist Wallace Broecker in 1975. Now, 1975, that's long before Al Gore picked it up and ran with it, by the way. So if anybody's going to be like, oh, you know, Al Gore came up with climate change to make some money, no, that the facts do not bear that out. Sorry, it was not Al Gore who came up with the word climate change. Also, he did not invent the internet.
I think the latest episode of Cosmos actually did a very good job of situating this, and also going through the points and saying, now maybe it could be this. Well, no, we know what this is. We can account for that. Because my father, actually, who is still more around where I was about a year ago, is still kind of like, nah, I'm not sold on it yet. That he's still not certain it's mostly man-made. But I saw that episode, and Neil deGrasse Tyson just goes through point by point pretty much everything that my father's always held out on, and says, well, it could be this, but no, we can account for that, we see it, and we know what's causing this or this and this. And they actually deal with it going back to the 50s and showing like video clips of things like that. And Carl Sagan in the 1980s in his Cosmos talking about climate change too. So yeah, you're absolutely right about that.
Frank Luntz wrote a memo back in 2003 and urged a lot of conservatives to start using the word climate change because it wasn't as emotive as global warming, and it didn't have that sort of less frightening. It had a less frightening connotation to it. Not that big of a deal. It's not scary. Whereas global warming is, it's scary because I don't like it when it's fucking hot. You know. So I think as progressives, I definitely feel that we've bought into their language by calling it climate change instead of global warming. And I know you might disagree with me about that, Stephen, but it's incredibly funny to say that because in the end it's sort of the same thing. But when it comes down to the end of the day, I mean, words matter.
It's not so much a matter of just that we're using that. Sorry, Stephen. I know you're about to talk. It's not just a matter of that we shifted it to climate change. It's a matter of timing. It's the fact that we started off with global warming and then we kind of shifted more to climate change in the public discourse, and that gives the perception of compromising and conceding ground. And it's that's the problem. If we'd started out with climate change, we probably would have had a different issue because it probably wouldn't have garnered as much attention as global warming did. But at the very least, we wouldn't have the issue of, oh, they're switching terms, therefore it's changing. It's not the reality, or whatever they're saying.
Isn't it sort of like, I'm sorry, Stephen, isn't it sort of like how progressives have sort of walked away from the term liberal because conservatives have made it a dirty word? Like that's sort of the parallel that I see. Maybe I'm like off a bit.
Stephen, no, I was going to say that it's because we did shift from global warming to using climate change because the Republicans and Fox News particularly started using that phrase more and more. Liberals, they've now also associated, certainly since 2008, they've associated the word change with only, maybe 5% change because of Obama. We've associated change with just meaning a tiny amount rather than a huge difference that could end humanity, which is what climate change potentially is. So I think that's one of the issues as well of using the term climate change, that people just associate it with, well, change is probably only a small amount of change, or it could be change for the better. Whereas as Jeff said, warming, well, if things keep on warming, then it's going to get hot, and I don't like getting hot all the time. So that's why it's a more emotive term, and that's why it's a more effective term. And that's why the media, certainly after seeing this study, CNN no longer has a science correspondent, so they're probably not going to even see this story. If they did, they should send out a memo to all of their journalists and on their hosts saying, whenever we do talk about this story, which is maybe twice every year, we refer to it as global warming and nothing else, because that's what's going to have the most impact.
And I think I want to start using the word global warming, to be honest with you, because it's something serious, and it's something that we should all be taking seriously. And if you have to use a stronger word for it and a stronger phrase for it, okay, I will. Liberals, we as liberals, we need to get better with our messaging. Like, I know it kind of sucks to have to say that, to have to do that. Like, we should package our ideas better. Well, that's the reality of it. We have to package our ideas better, or else nobody's going to, people are going to go to what sounds better, sounds snappier, and sounds easier. It's almost like putting up a video on YouTube. You want to have a good title to it to make people want to click.
I just want to clarify. I personally, I don't think any of us here are actually saying it's a right-wing plot. We're just saying that the timing of the word change in the public discourse has done a disservice to progressives and to the cause of advocates of climate change.
At the end of the day, all we want to do is we want to do the best to get our message out and to say, hey, we need to fucking do something about the climate, or else we're going to fuck ourselves. And so, and Republicans are out there and are trying to do as much as they can to preserve oil company profits. I mean, that's their primary goal. They don't give a fuck about the climate because they give a fuck about their donors, and that's about it. So that's why they're going to do anything that they can to change the discussion, to try and minimize, to minimize what's happening to the climate and to the environment, and say, well, you ain't got to worry about that. You don't got to worry about that. It's going to destroy the economy. It does us a disservice to sort of buy into that narrative as well by using their term for it. And so we need to kind of own our term, own global warming, and say, look, this is a serious issue, and we have to take care of it.